Okay, so what you're currently looking at is the Dow Jones. As you can see, there's a lot more red than there is green, and it's been like this for a few days now. And on Saturday, Trump's tariffs that he announced, 10% tariffs amongst all goods from among 60 countries, just across the board tariffs, as well as what they called reciprocal tariffs for tariffs placed by other countries. Now, they said it was tariffs placed by other countries, but what it seemed to actually be, but Trump didn't use the words for this, it was tariffs placed upon countries for their trade deficits with the United States. For example, they calculated that Vietnam has a 90% tariff on the United States when it actually currently has about a 1% tariff. And being off by such a margin, it's just no way for me to do the math to get anywhere close there. But you look at the math equation they released to find out what the tariff rate is. It was just the equation that largely relied upon their trade deficit numbers. So it doesn't really seem to be about necessarily getting rid of tariffs or getting rid of like all these problems of us getting screwed by these countries' unfair trade barriers, because Vietnam and other countries, and we're going to talk to this in a bit, have offered 0 for 0 complete free trade between the countries, getting rid of those tariff barriers, and that has so far been rejected. We're going to get into that later. So this barreling forward of the Dow Jones since Saturday, down, 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 has been, I think, a lot of the market realizing as we're getting closer to a 20% drop, which will officially mark us as entering a bear market, whether it comes to the S&P, which is probably seeing some of the biggest declines. I think it's down to 17, going towards 18%. Again, 20% is the bear market number. The reason it's continuing to barrel down is people are realizing that Trump has pulled the trigger. Trump's pulled the trigger, and while there is a possibility he might break off from tariffs later, he might say this was a bad idea, we need to recover. We don't see any sign of that. In fact, so far, all of Trump's language has been digging in. It has been him saying, actually, we're going to increase our tariffs on China now because China has tariffed us back, and it's an escalating trade war. So it's going in the opposite direction. And as these offers for tariffs to drop have been made by Vietnam and Europe, and they have not been accepted, confidence has continued to slip that this was a bluff, that this is a negotiation tactic that's only going to be very brief. Because if they, and I see like Trump supporters touting around like, yay, Vietnam's going to get rid of its 1% tariff rate on the 13 billion goods we trade over there. Okay, I don't really think it was worth the $6 trillion worth of value that was just lost in the stock market. Well, not even just the stock market. We're just talking about in the S&P. Okay, so I don't know if it was worth that, but congratulations, that hasn't been accepted. That hasn't been accepted. So if that hasn't been accepted, then what can we expect countries like Vietnam, which have trade deficits with us? I mean, they're Vietnam. They're much, to be blunt, poorer country that work in manufacturing of cheaper goods that we would not be able to manufacture economically within the United States, and they trade that by exporting that to America. And so if we start demanding that they buy more of our goods, like what are we going to get Vietnam to buy to make up for that massive trade deficit? Because they're a much poorer country providing us with imports. I mean, what do we want them to buy our cars? Do we really think the average Vietnamese person could afford to buy a car that would be supporting not only the parts, but its manufacturing within the United States for a unionized auto manufacturer? So when I think of the end goal here, that's where I think a lot of the people in the market are starting to get especially worried as the bear market gets closer and the talk is of a recession. Again, Trump was elected on the mandate of making the economy work for working people. And so in their minds, if they can like succeed in bringing manufacturing to the United States, then maybe in the long run, this could be something that helps American workers. Now, if you lose a bunch of manufacturing jobs along the way because you're getting rid of the imports that are necessary to make goods here, if you end up increasing the costs on American consumers so that they're consuming less and that leads to a loss in jobs, or that you increase inflation, or that you zap investor confidence, or that you crash a stock market. Now, if you do all these things, that's going to make it harder for people to want to invest domestically in the United States, even in manufacturing, let alone anything else. Maybe it'll do stronger slightly, but will that make up for all of the lost potential in other industries, or the lost potential in manufacturing that could have come from, for example, importing some parts from Canada and manufacturing the rest of the vehicle in the United States, as we have integrated ourselves within the North American manufacturing market? Point is, we're ripped off the Band-Aid. We're bleeding out. We don't really have any sight of another Band-Aid coming on. And as we're continuing to bleed out, the exact end goal of what us ripping off the Band-Aid was for in the first place, outside of, well, manufacturing in the long run, is not in sight. Meaning that this could be, and we're hearing some talk from his advisors, permanent. Now, here's the problem, though. Having these tariffs as permanent will cause a recession. That is going to happen if these are permanent tariffs. Now, maybe Trump says we need to enter a recession to enter the American Golden Age. Maybe that'll be the campaign message going into 2026. Good luck. Okay? Spin that, Mr. Magic Man, businessman. That could be the message, you know. We need to enter this recession. But I don't think it's a particularly strong message. I don't think it'll work for the American consumer in 2026, and I don't think it'll work at the voting booth in 2026. So I got to watch these people, these advisors, slink around Trump and know economic logic, understand the problems that we're facing, but have to pitter-patter around it. Dance around the idea, because if they are honest about what could be ahead of the United States, that could mean losing their job. And so they're too scared to tell Trump, sir, just cash your checks now. We have Vietnam saying 0 for 0. Europe has said 0 for 0. Cash your checks now. He said no. And so when these guys are asked, are these going to be permanent? His advisors, they kind of dilly-dally around it, which has, again, continued to add a lack of consumer confidence, well, a lack of investor confidence to the market. Let me show you him trying to talk about these 90-day tariffs. And remember, if these tariffs are kept in place and they're not removed or paused across the board, this will lead to a recession. Hassett knows this. The guy that he's talking to here, this guy used to advise Mitt Romney, used to advise McCain. He has some economic sense about him. That's not to say he's an economic genius. He predicted right before the dot-com bubble popping that we were going to see a huge upswing in the market. So, you know, he's not exactly an economic genius, but he's not an economic Neanderthal. And so when asked whether or not we're going to pause it, or, you know, whether or not it's possible that these are going to be permanent tariffs, this is how he answers every single time, because they're scared to stand up to him.
Will you do a 90-day pause? Would you consider that?
Or Bill, yeah, you know, I think that the president is going to decide what the president's going to decide. There are more than 50 countries in negotiation with the president. We've got the prime minister of Israel coming today. We've had a reach out overnight from Taiwan. And but I would urge everyone, especially Bill, to ease off the rhetoric a little bit. The fact is that say 10% baseline tariff is on what, 14% of GDP. That's about how much trade we have, how many imports. And so 86% of GDP is affected by the deregulation and the tax cuts and everything else.
Listen to that, 14% of GDP. If we lost half of that, that would mean economic catastrophe. It might not sound like it, but that will mean the loss of jobs. That'll mean the loss of consumer confidence, of investor confidence. That'll mean shops closing down. You could say, oh, well, that's the smaller percentage. Okay, if I was to just go to the American people and say, okay, you've lost 18% of your income. Oh, that's only 18% of my, wait a second. Yeah, it's a little different. 18%. And a reminder, it's not going to be like everybody just loses 18%. It's going to be disproportionate in certain industries. For example, automakers who have to import certain parts, Or, for example, those who rely on microchip imports from Taiwan, which has seen the worst day on the Taiwanese stock market since its creation because it's a big trading partner with the United States. The United States presumably needs Taiwanese chips, but we're placing a tax on them, even though we still have to import them because we simply don't make enough at home. So we're just adding a tax for those who want to engage in the use of high quality, top shelf electronics.
And even if you think, and I think a lot of us at the White House think that these economic responses are exaggerated by critics, even if you think that there will be some negative effect from the trade side, that's still a small share of GDP. As the idea that it's going to be a nuclear winter or something like that is completely irresponsible rhetoric.
Now, that was from, of course, a Trump official. Now let's listen to Fox News host. Mind you, the people I'm going to be throwing a lot at you today are going to be diehard Trump sycophants who are, there to fight for Trump no matter what, and people who are literally paid by Trump. And the reason I'm bringing those guys out is there's not really many other people who can come out and defend Trump's economic policy. There's not. So on the other end, I'm just going to use people like CNBC, certain Fox News hosts, and people that would, in any other circumstance, be in the president's corner, desperately trying to find some way. You can even see it in their mind, trying to find a way to avoid saying what they have to say because it's their job.
It is going to have an effect on Main Street. Some things will become higher priced. We will see some products actually be raised in price because companies will pass on the cost of tariffs to consumers. I would expect that. That's why you have some people saying that we could see a recession, we'll see a growth slowdown. This morning, Nancy Lazar, who I follow very closely, and I think she's terrific, from Piper Sandler, she says if the tariffs stay in place for at least the next 6 months, even if only 50% of the price shocks where we're seeing products go higher in price show through the economy, U.S. real GDP is on track to decline about 1% in the second quarter and in the third quarter, with unemployment rising.
So that's the scene that's being set right now. That's the pathway we're walking down. Bear market, very close by. Recession, we see it in the distance. And the Trump administration and its staff is currently hoping and praying that they're going to hit the bottom of this soon. Or I think many of them, to be blunt, when I listen to them talk, don't know where the end of this is and is just looking for an escape raft and hoping to avoid Trump's wrath in the meantime. And we're going to see a lot of that, I think, today. But first, let's go to the big man himself. Let's go to the guy who has started this trade crusade and see the type of rhetoric he's putting out there to try to inspire confidence in consumers, confidence in investors, try to make people not pull their money out of the market as people's retirement savings are going up in smoke. Let's start with some of his Truth Social posts. Donald Trump, this is from yesterday. We have massive financial deficits with China, the European Union, and many others. The only way this problem can be cured is with tariffs, which are now bringing tens of billions of dollars into the USA. They are already in effect, and a beautiful thing to behold. The surplus with these countries has grown during the presidency of Sleepy Joe Biden. We are quickly going to reverse it. Someday, people will realize that tariffs for the United States of America are a very beautiful thing. Now, let's just put out there, when he says financial deficits, he keeps throwing out this word, financial deficits. The way most Americans probably know about financial deficits is, our financial deficit, as in, hey, we spend $100 billion, we have $80 billion budget, $20 billion deficit. That's building into our debt every year. That's the deficit. That's how most people understand deficits. Well, when he says financial deficits, right, he doesn't say trade deficits, but that's what he's talking about when he says financial deficit. I don't know why he calls it a financial deficit. What is financial deficit? Financial deficit to me would mean your government is spending more than it's, taking in. Financial deficit, the first thing I would not think is, trade deficit. The reason why is if I think the American consumer heard that, our goal is to make it so Vietnam buys more of our goods than we buy of theirs. We know that's just not going to work. We just know that's not going to happen. Some countries don't have a consumer base that would be willing to buy those products. So the government's going to have to step in and either subsidize it, or you're not going to get them to buy it. Or I guess the government's going to have to go out of the way to somehow strengthen these foreign countries' consumer markets. Don't know how you're going to do that. Good luck. Lower energy prices again, as is this Trump's solution to everything. Let's continue. Oil prices are down. Interest rates are down. Food prices are down. There is no inflation. You hear that, guys? There's no inflation. He declared it. And the long-time abused USA is bringing in billions of dollars a week from the abusing countries. On tariffs that are already in place. This is despite the... Now, okay, let's say billions of dollars a week from tariffs. Let's say this is true, that we're bringing in this billions of dollars tariffs. Again, he's saying that this is from abusing countries. These tariffs are placed upon those who consume the products. When you go out and you buy a foreign product, you are going to be paying more for the foreign product than you would pay for a domestic alternative. We don't even know if that's the case, by the way, because it still might cost more to make a domestic option than a foreign option, depending on what the good is. But assuming that that's the case, that is a tax on the consumer, trying to motivate them to make a different choice, because you don't think they'll make that choice on their own, that they won't choose American on their own, so you need to make them choose American by financially de-incentivizing the other choices. Not even financially incentivizing the American choice, by financially de-incentivizing the other choice, which is going to bring all of the prices up. Because let's say that you did bring European prices up a ton. What American brand, now being, given basically no competition for overseas, would not take advantage of the operation to increase their own prices, increase their own profit with a now captive market? Maybe some won't. Hopefully most won't. But these are centers of profit, okay? These are not caring, loving machines of patriotism that are going to choose the country and its people first before its profit motive. But let's say that this is all true. Billions of dollars a week. We have lost like $6 trillion from the S&P alone. You're talking about peanuts. You're talking about taking pennies out of the cushions of the couch as the bank is on fire. This is despite the fact that the biggest abuser of them all, China, whose markets are crashing, just raised its tariffs by 34% on top of its long-term ridiculously high tariffs, plus not acknowledging my warning for abusing countries not to retaliate. That's the worst part, that they didn't acknowledge Trump's warning. What did he expect to happen? See, this is the thing. We are feeling the impact of Trump's tariffs right now. We are yet to feel, and by the way, not all of those impacts have registered yet. They're still registering throughout the economy as more and more investors are realizing that there's a decent chance that we're not bluffing and that we're going to stick to this for a bit. That this is the path he's going to choose. Now, we don't know that for sure, because Trump could always get, scared and back off, or, something happens. But as more and more investors come to that realization, that's going to sink in more, and we're going to cut off more and more value off the stock market. That's before China and other countries like them respond with their own tariffs. What did we expect was going to happen? Okay, we shouldn't be so naive as to think we are the United States, we are powerful, we are strong, we have money, therefore we can just tariff and tax all these different countries' goods, make it perform worse off in our own economies, and they're not going to do the same for our goods in their economies. They're not going to protect their businesses. They're not going to protect their own financial assets. Or if they do, they're going to do it through concession. Now, the Europeans have been gracious towards us so far. Okay, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but the Europeans have been gracious. They have come out and said that, you know what, they want to avoid more tariffs. They're saying they would like to have negotiations instead. They would like to negotiate before they instill any tariffs on U.S. goods. That's even though we've already instilled tariffs on them. You know why that is? 80 years of Euro-Atlantism. 80 years of Euro-Atlantism. That's what that is. That is our defense relationship. That is the culture of our two peoples being brought together. That is the hope that Trump, it does not speak for all of the American people. That is the hope to avoid an economic downturn as they have to increase their defense spending, which Trump said is with his own country's interests, yet we're undermining it currently through undermining their economies as they're trying to pick up this defense spending. Again, it's not a coherent, overarching strategy here. It feels like a bunch of strategies pulling in different directions, some of them counteracting each other. But that's the EU. China's going to increase its tariffs. And if we increase our tariffs again, as Trump has announced he will likely do, then they will increase the tariffs again. And do not think just because the EU is waiting for now and preferring negotiations that if these tariffs stay in place, that they will not come with their own tariffs. And when those tariffs fall, China, Europe, and all these different nations of the world, India, who knows? Hell, even if half of them back down, but half of them stay up, that is going to be a disaster for retirees who have their savings in the stock market. It's going to be a disaster for the top 10% of this country who have a lot of their capital stacked up in stocks, do now control a disproportionate amount of the nation's wealth. And it's going to be a disaster for those in the job market who could be affected by those capital outflows. My goodness. Continuing on Trump's, look, I feel assuaged. I feel comforted. Countries from all over the world are talking to us. Tough but fair parameters are being set. Spoke to the Japanese Prime Minister this morning. He is sending a top team to negotiate. They have treated the U.S. very poorly on trade. They don't take our cars, but we take millions of theirs. Likewise, agriculture and many other things. It all has to change, but especially with China. Yesterday, China issued retaliatory tariffs of 34%. What did we expect? On top of their already record-setting tariffs, non-monetary tariffs, illegal subsidization of companies, and massive long-term currency manipulation. Despite my warnings that any country that retaliates against the U.S. by issuing additional tariffs above and beyond their already existing long-term tariffs abuse our nation, will be immediately met with new and substantially higher tariffs. Do you know what this sounds like? Your tariffs will lead to my tariffs, will lead to your tariffs. It's a trade war. We are not sleepwalking into a trade war. We are wide-eyed, bushy tail awake, jogging into a trade war, over and above those initially set. Therefore, if China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8th, we have 24 hours, by the way, the United States will impose additional tariffs on China of 50%, effective April 9th. 48 hours. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated. They are nuclear power. We're nuclear power. We have U.S. military buildup and their military buildup in the same regions. We are the U.S. military and their military needs to be in peer-to-peer communication to avoid a crisis. Negotiations with other countries, which have also requested meetings, will begin taking place immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Ending it like an HR email. The United States has a chance to do something that should have been done decades ago. This is my favorite. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid. Don't be a panician. Don't be a panician. Parentheses, a new party based on weak and stupid people. Be strong, courageous, and patient, and greatness will be the result. Trump was told we need to restore investor confidence. People are panicking. The markets are going down. What do we do, sir? And he's like, remember, guys, you're American, not a panician, as in panicking because you're weak and stupid. Well, sir, you've restored my confidence. Thank you very much. I will be taking 10 million Raytheon stocks, please. Let's move over from Trump, because obviously Trump is not really, with the panicky and whatever, he's not picking up the ball when it comes to assuaging, making investors feel calm, making consumers feel calm, making those who are watching their retirement savings go up in smoke feel calm. And I gotta say, people talking down 401k, saying, I've never looked at my 401k before. It's not working. That's not going to win over the American public. I'll also say, before we start, that the president engaging in a golf tournament the day that these tariffs were instituted, which then saw economic decline in the stock market, it doesn't inspire confidence. Now, I understand the messaging here of like, hey, we just announced the tariffs. Like, I'm playing golf because everything's okay and there's nothing to panic about. That could have been the message, but I don't think it was received well. No, I don't think it was received well. And it certainly was not received well when Joe Biden was on the beach during any number of issues America was having, relaxing with his family. But that, of course, did get a different reception by Republican Senator John Kennedy when asked about Donald Trump playing golf during this economic crisis.
Sir, President Trump.
Oh, by the way, he didn't just play golf. He announced that he won another golf tournament. It's strange. This 80-year-old man just keeps winning golf tournaments, which also so happen to be hosted by facilities that he owns, operates, or allies with. It's Kim Jong-un shit, man. Come on.
Sir, President Trump played golf over the weekend. He posted a video of himself golfing. Do you think that was a bad look, considering where the markets were?
No, I don't think American people care that much. They understand that presidents relax on the weekends and get away. It doesn't mean that he wasn't talking on the phone when he was on the golf course or wasn't in meetings. I don't think there's ever really a time when a president is not on call.
What, can we get a president who doesn't like golf? I'm sorry. Why is it that every single one of these highfalutin pencil necks like golf? Okay, I'm not trying to be too mean to golf. If you like golf, it's fine. But can't we get like a president that's like Hemingway? It's like, yeah, no, I want to go to the fights. I want to go to the fights. You know, Trump went to UFC fights. That's much more he gets such a better reception when he goes to UFC fights than when he posts these videos of him bragging about his golf record. Whatever. Anyway, moving on to something of import. I did want to show you Bassett. This is Treasury Secretary Bassett. Again, one of Trump's top financial officials. The markets lost more than $6 trillion in value. It was $6 trillion in total value. So I was saying S&P earlier. Was this disruption always part of the plan?
The markets lost more than $6 trillion in value. Is this disruption always part of the plan, Mr. Secretary?
Look, Chris, markets are organic, animals, and you never know what the reaction's going to be. One thing that I can tell you as the Treasury Secretary, what I've been very impressed with is the market infrastructure.
I'm sorry. You have no clue what the market's going to do. But economists from across the spectrum said that if you put across-the-board tariffs on all these goods, including goods you don't have domestic alternatives for, this is going to lead to an increase of prices, going to hurt the stock. Everybody, and I mean, this is much further than what anybody expected. Nobody could have known what would happen if you took an economic center of trade, a global node for trade, in fact, the most important global node for the system that we've built, and we just say we're going to tax it at the highest rate, the highest tax increase in American history. We're going to do it in one fell swoop on trade as a global node of trade. Oh, who could have known what would happen? At a certain point, it's like, look, yeah, I stabbed myself. Who could have known that I would bleed?
As the Treasury Secretary, what I've been very impressed with is the market infrastructure, that we had record volume on Friday, and everything is working very smoothly, so the American people, they can be very take great comfort in that. And in terms of the market reaction, look, we get these short-term market reactions from time to time. The market consistently underestimates Donald Trump. I remember that in 2016, the night President Trump won, the market crashed. And it turned out he was going to be the most pro-business president in over a century, maybe in the history of the country, and we went on to very high after inflation returns for the next 4 years.
See, the way you hear them talking about it is, yeah, you know, the markets are like animals. You don't know, go up or down, who knows? But markets, I mean, it's like a magic 8-ball. You have no market the economy. You know what I'm saying? It almost, it sounds like Charlie Day from Always Sunny, like trying to make economy, markets, finance, business, money. You know, just throw out buzzwords at this point. But this thing at the end, well, people thought first time Trump would be bad for the markets, and then look, he was pro-business. Okay, but he also added 25% of our entire federal debt in that period and did not make up for those tax breaks, which did help spur some growth, but the growth did not make up for the loss in our budget. So it was growth at the expense of the American taxpayer and future generations who are going to have to make up for that because he didn't balance it out. And Trump said that he'd get rid of our debt in 4 years because he says everything, and it doesn't really matter. He'll say like he'll fucking cure cancer with a toothpick and a piece of bubble gum. It doesn't matter. He'll promise anything. So trying to like reach back to the first term Trump to explain current Trump, not only is it a worthless conversation and just a deviation, like a complete pivot, but first term Trump wasn't exactly an economic winner to begin with. Continuing. Oh, by the way, if you want to know the general mood of the market, I'm sorry, I forgot I put this up here, but this was my favorite cultural reaction to the market failure. This is from the Looney Tunes. This is from the official Looney Tunes TikTok account that they posted this voiceover acted clip of Bugs Bunny talking about the market crash.
Now, let's go to our field reporter who is now live on Wall Street. Wiley?
8 seconds. All it took to bring me joy out of so much pain. By the way, and before we get into like a lot of the really diehard sycophants, right? And I know I can't believe I say this, it gets worse. I wanted to stay a little bit in like reality land, just for like a little bit more. And we're gonna go with CNBC. CNBC is the finance network. They lost Joe Kernan. Now, Joe Kernan, for those of you who do not know, Joe Kernan, okay, he is somebody who's been up there defending Trump before first term. He's somebody who was defending Trump going into the second term, defending a lot of his economic philosophy, even though people would come out and they would lambast. He'd stick his neck out. He wasn't the worst of the worst, but he would do that. And on the finance market, here is Joe Kernan finally, I don't want to say throwing in the towel, but seemingly giving up on finding any way to justify what's going on from the White House when it comes to tariff policy, as the markets continue to contract and we head to a bear.
And I think from policy institutes on both sides of the aisle, the methodology that was used has been universally derided as being non-serious.
He's talking about the math equation that was used to calculate the tariff rates for different countries that led to Ukraine getting 10%, Vietnam getting near 40%, and Russia getting nothing.
I don't know whether you know exactly who came up with the formula, but it allowed you to at least characterize most of these countries as being their tariffs well above the reality of the situation, so that when you say that we're going to do half on them, it was much higher than anyone anticipated. And I think you'd have to concede that this was not the market reaction you were looking for.
Listen, he's speaking to Peter Navarro right now, by the way. He's speaking to Peter Navarro. So this is a Trump-friendly econ guy on CNBC talking to like just Team Trump, Peter Navarro, right? Navarro's been with him for quite a bit now. And the way that they're talking about this is almost like, come on, just acknowledge reality. Acknowledge what's going to happen. Just please tell me you know what's going on. It almost feels like they're just pleading for them to just call the sky blue.
There's a way of maybe incrementally trying to accomplish some of the things that the president wants to do in a reasonable, serious way. And this just...
Is Ron Vara? Is that Ron Vara? Am I wrong? Sorry. Yeah, Peter Navarro. Yeah, sorry. Does somebody go... I don't know. Somebody call him Ron Vara? No, that's Peter Navarro. I'm looking at it. It looks like Peter Navarro to me, doesn't it? Yeah.
almost across the board has caused what you're seeing in the stock market and a lot of head scratching and head shaking on whether anyone...
It's a joke. Ron Vara is a source on economic. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'm outside the joke. Where were we?
And this just almost across the board has caused what you're seeing in the stock market and a lot of head scratching and head shaking on whether anyone really knows what they're doing in this case, Peter.
All right, well,
Can you at least acknowledge that?
Sure. No, I can't, because here's what I'm seeing. You throw a lot of stuff at me. First of all, the methodology was perfectly sound. It was done by the Council of Economic Advisors, based on long-term studies that are in the academic literature. And the people taking pot shots at us are the same people that always take pot shots
The
at us.
American
So
Enterprise Institute, Peter.
Of course. Joe, come on. The American Enterprise Institute.
Let's keep going because there's so many of these. We'll go back to Bassett. We'll go back to the Treasury Secretary. This is during an interview where he is being asked about Trump's original promise on improving the economy on day one. I know we've gotten so far away from Trump's promises, but we do need to remember Trump said on day one that he was going to bring down people's grocery prices. He was going to bring down the cost of living, that if you want lower prices, vote for Trump. That was the overarching economic message. Want lower inflation? Vote for Trump. You want lower prices? Vote for Trump. That was the overarching message. He said it on campaign stop after campaign stop. Then he gets elected, prices go up. Prices go up. And when he's elected mainly due to people's economic dissatisfaction with the status quo, and then you don't just not deliver, you go in the other direction, there's going to be some questions about the promises that were made. There's a reason why Trump is polling the worst on the economy he's ever polled.
That he was going to improve the economy starting on day one. He said prices are going to come down. More than 160 million Americans, Mr. Secretary, as you know, are invested in the market. Many of them have spent their lives saving for their retirement. What is your message to Americans who want to retire right now and who've just seen their lifetime savings drop significantly?
Well, Chris, I think that's a false narrative. Americans who want to retire right now, the Americans who have put away for years in their savings accounts, I think they don't look at the day-to-day fluctuations of what's happening. And,
I could just say they might not, but they hear it and they get worried. And the people that I know that aren't looking at it because like, oh, don't worry. They're not looking at it because I'm scared to look at it. I'm scared to look at how much of my retirement's left. So there are people paying attention to that because maybe it doesn't mean that much to Scott, but an extra $50,000 to $100,000 is what gets somebody to the end of their life or not.
in fact, most Americans don't have everything in the market.
Hell, an extra 20 to 30,000, 40,000.
Americans in a 401k have what's called a 60-40 account. That is 60 of 40 accounts. They are down 5 or 6% on the year. People have a long-term view. They have a program that...
When I say long-term view, let's be clear. If you're trying to retire right now, what do you mean long-term view? If you're about to retire, you just retired, you know, you're trying to now go off and live with your, you know, your family off who knows where, and you're trying to figure out your finances. You want to pull out your money now, and you now see the stocks tanking. Yeah, that is a problem. Because for some people, it's like, well, now I don't know how I'm going to make those extra. If I live to 80-something, now I have enough money to live to 85, but I don't have enough money to live to 90. What do I do if I get to 96, 97, 98 now? Had enough money before, now I don't. So would the question just be, don't retire yet? Work a few more years? Make up the difference?
The reason
just wait and hope?
The stock market is considered a good investment is because it's a long-term investment. If you look day to day, week to week, it's very risky. Over the long term, it's a good investment.
But we don't even know if he's going to keep these tariffs in place or not. There's some indication that he could make them permanent. And if they are permanent, you're talking about years-long economic contractions. I mean, you're not going to be able to recover that market value that we're going to lose from world trade within the next few months. Now let's move on from, I think, some of the, well, we're going to go back to a few more of these people. You know, we're going to go back to a few more of the Trump sycophants, but as in the official sycophants. But I want to make sure that we stop by some of the alt media ones. This is the talking points we're hearing now. This is what we're going to hear now. As the economy gets bad, we're going to start hearing, put on your sweaters when it's chilly to save money on heating. This is the type of dialogue we're going to get. Listen to this from the quartering. You do not need the new iPad. You do not need the new cell phone. You do not need the new video game console. You want them. There is a big difference. And if you look at the people whining about the tariffs, I challenge you to ask them how their lives have been affected in any way. Well, my grandmother's retirement is worse off, and now discussions about, family retirement are a little bit more difficult. There's one that's personal, It was very difficult with, the house burning, and, when people already have economic issues, and now they have to look at the savings that they were going to pull from to deal with those issues, housing issues, medical issues, whatever that might be, especially as you get older. And, oh, look, that money that was supposed to be there for your rainy day fund, if something happens with your, dementia progressing, now it's gone. Now it's gone. Now, look, you could say, well, okay, that's one instance, but what about active workers? What about the manufacturers in Iowa or Michigan who have already lost their auto manufacturing jobs? Again, people are being affected. Just because you have been saved from the worst effects, because the way you make money is YouTube donations and not, amongst the traditional workforce who are going to be much more affected, even though we'll be affected too by, a decrease in donations, wouldn't be that surprising. But this idea of just, oh, you don't need these new things, as if everybody's just drowning in beautiful consumer goods, and the only negative effect this is going to have is on brand new iPads, which, by the way, I do think that having these items be more consumable for everyday people is a positive thing. I don't think it's a negative thing if you're should we be a country that's like, yeah, we should be aiming in the other direction. Like, yeah, we need less iPhones. We should buy less. We should consume less video games, less phones, less big TV screens. Maybe we replace our TV screens less every 5 years. And we're not doing it out of some Save the Earth program, okay? We're doing it out of economic necessity. I don't think you're going to be able to convince a nation of consumers that that's the way to go, champ. Okay, good luck with that. Also, we finally got a question directly to a U.S. government official about the import tariff on the nation entirely populated by penguins. So for those of you who don't know, when the Trump administration announced their across-the-board tariffs of 10% stacked on top of the other tariffs of nations, which, of course, has now led to this whole economic kerfluffle, there was a lot of nations in there that were kind of confusing. Vietnam was one that was confusing, but one that was very confusing is a nation, a little island, that has no people on it. We're not importing anything really from them, just some penguins on it. But we instituted a tariff against them. Now, it led some to believe, me included, that this list of nations that were tariffing and how exactly it was strung together in not an unalphabetical order, in no way is it ordered in a way that makes kind of sense. Point is, there's a lot of details of the nations that have been included that are kind of confusing. It's led to some people, me included, thinking, did they just kind of throw this together last second? And so John Tapper has asked about why this little nation of penguins was included, why we are sanctioning the Happy Feet. And the agricultural secretary just basically pretended the question was not worth answering. Like it was beneath them.
President Trump laid out with a giant graphic of all the countries where tariffs were going to be, what he called reciprocal tariffs, were going to be imposed. And you're imposing a 10% tariff on the herd in McDonald Islands. The herd in McDonald Islands have 0 human inhabitants. They have 0 exports. They have 0 imports. They do have a lot of penguins. Why are you putting import tariffs on islands that are entirely populated by penguins?
Well, I mean, come on, Jake. Obviously, here's the bottom line. We live under a tariff regime from other countries.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can we go back? What was that obviously going to lead to? What comes after obviously there? Obviously, they have struck us bad. Obviously, that was stupid. Obviously, that was a mistake. Obviously, what? Then she immediately backed off of it and then just avoids it.
We live under a tariff regime from other countries. We have too long
the McDonald Islands is not imposing
the idea that America goes first. I mean, come on. Whatever. Listen, the people that are leading this are serious, intentional, patriotic, the smartest people I've ever worked with. I did not come up with the formulas. I'm the ag secretary.
These people are genius. It's genius. Well, can we ask you any questions about it? Well, it's not me. I didn't do it. Don't make me part of the tariff movement. This movement's great, but I'm not. Don't make me the face of it. Don't make me the face of it. Don't connect me to it. Don't connect. It's really smart though. I mean, whatever though. Like whatever. If you wanted to get a better idea of what the end goal that they're trying to envision for us is, it's going to be a little different depending on which talking head you listen to. For example, right? Like if you have Howard Lutnick on Face the Nation, instead of being told, about the breadth of all these American manufacturing jobs in the auto industry we're going to bring back from Japan by sanctioning Japanese auto manufacturers, instead it might be like, how about we have big human factories drill holes into little thing. Listen to that. I don't know how to he describes it in a way that only he can describe.
Great American work.
Let me turn this up.
Workers, we are going to replace
on other networks.
armies of millions of people. Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones. That kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the trade craft of America, is going to fix them, is going to work on them. They're going to be mechanics. There's going to be HVAC specialists. There's going to be electricians. The trade craft of America, our high school educated Americans, the core to our workforce is going to have the greatest resurgence of jobs in the history of America to work on these high-tech factories, which are all coming to America. That's what's going to build our next generation of America.
Okay, so screwing in little screws. Now, let's just throw this out there. If you are a well-educated college graduate wanting to work as an engineer, you're not going to want to sit down on a factory line with a screwdriver screwing in little screws in iPhones. You just don't want to do that. Okay. I'm not putting down that work. I'm just saying that there's a reason why those jobs currently don't exist in the United States. Not only due to more safety standards in the United States, higher rates of pay, non-government run unions being able, whatever it could be. What's the goal here? So the goal is we're going to bring manufacturing jobs to the United States, which will then be made up by robots, automated machines, and then those machines will then be maintained by college graduate engineers. Okay. I would like, high-end electronic goods to be manufactured in the United States, even if it's through automated systems. But let's also not pretend that the jobs that you're going to be bringing to the United States in this dream, that it's not, because there's either you got one or two options here. You either got the human factory where you have all these people screwing in the screws, which are not going to be high paying jobs, which you're going to have to gut a lot of regulation to make it cost effective and a lot of safety protocol to make it cost effective in comparison to other countries. Unless you just make it so cost ineffective by adding tariffs that you just bring prices up altogether, but you make it so therefore these American competitors could compete. Either way, you have that, or, which I guess could be job offers to a lot of Americans if you fill up those positions enough, or high-end engineering jobs that'll design the robots and maintain the robots that actually do the manufacturing. But those jobs are going to require some pretty high-end college degrees or pretty high educated training if you're going to be maintaining these systems. And so I don't know if that type of access to education is going to be available for every blue collar worker, especially if we're not trying to deal with, the student debt crisis. I mean, maybe it could be fulfilled by tradesmen to a certain extent, but do we have enough people to fulfill those roles? Do we have the training to fulfill those roles? These are all questions I have. None of them I don't think are going to be answered in the near future. Next one. What kind of manufacturing are you talking about returning here? This is more on the same question I'm having. What exactly is the plan here? Big human factories or high-end machinists maintaining robots?
And we're not going to have all factories come back. Like clothing manufacturing, that's tough to bring back. But what kind of manufacturing are you talking about returning here?
Well, you can't just give that away. See, what's going to happen is robotics are going to replace the cheap labor that we've seen all across the world. I mean, think of what our factories did. They went to the cheapest labor in the whole world, slave labor, cheap labor, the worst environmental conditions, polluting the heck out of it. And then we bring back those cheap products here and we feel good about ourselves because we don't see the pain.
So again, robotics. So these jobs that we sent overseas, they're going to come back and they're going to give it to a robot. Again, I'm not against these type of, in a lot of instances, somewhat soul-crushing work being automated away so people could, concentrate on other jobs. But this administration's not talking about that. This administration is insinuating that we're going to bring all these jobs back, that they're going to make up for the industrial decay that we had in the heartland, when really those jobs is going to go to, Robot Steve, not, Joshua in, the former manufacturing plant in Dayton, Ohio. And so this message, this is not an impossible thing to expect to happen in the future, robotics replacing cheap labor, but this is an economic message for who? Who is this economic message for? It's certainly not a job offer for the majority of Trump's base who got him elected. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent obliterates NBC's Kristen Walker on tariff with numbers. Okay, so I want to make sure I heard one of Scott Bessent's better moments so I can get crushed. We can all get crushed. Let's listen to Kirsten get crushed by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Kristen, what I like is data. And if we look at data from President Trump's first term, and there's a big study that just came out from a group of economists, mostly at MIT, that showed that a 20% tariff on China led to a 0.7% tax or price level increase over 4 years. I think that's pretty good. If we can take in 20% in tariffs and it's a 0.7% increase, and Kristen, the little publicized story this week,
But okay, 20%. We're number one, we're passing 20% in tariffs. Trump's now talking about 50% in tariffs. And putting aside any cherry picking of studies, that's just China. Trump's picking a tariff fight with the entire world. Just China is going to do enough damage, economic damage on its own. We're not just talking about China here. We're talking about the other alternatives, which like markets would be, okay, if we can't sell it in China, let's sell it here. Those countries are also having tariffs placed upon them.
Wants to look at the stock market going down. You know what else went down? Oil prices went down almost 15% in 2 days, which...
That is true. Now, let me ask you a question. Why do you guys think that oil prices went down? Do you guys think it went down because we found some new oil reserves? We greatly increased the supply because of Trump's new investments? It's because there's less trade. And if there's less trade and there's less consumption, then that means there's less production. And if there's less production, that means it consumes less fuel, less energy. There's less driving. There's less moving around of cars and ships. And that's why the prices fell. So yes, one of the side effects of an economic downturn or an economic slowing down can be decreased oil prices, which, funnily enough, is the only actual pressure the American government has placed on the Russians by accident. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Kremlin is panicking right now because the crude oil was near $70 and now it's down to like 15. And that is how they prop up the Russian economy, prop up the Russian government, is the selling of oil and crude and of different refined products. And if the prices are tanking, that means the amount they can get for those exported goods are going down as well. Not to mention the fact that they already have to sell it to the Chinese and the Indians at a discount because of their unfavorable negotiating position. This has led to Dmitry Peskov, Putin's press secretary, as you can see, the man right here, talking about, oh, we need to really closely monitor this tariff stuff. Oh boy, this is not good. Listen to this. We are very closely monitoring the situation, which is currently characterized as extremely turbulent, tense, and emotionally overloaded. Okay, let me just put forward, by the way, that the way that Russia budgeted this year was at $70 per barrel. If it stays at 50, how do the Russians make up the difference for the 2025 budget? Further cannibalization of the commercial market? That point is, Russia's in a tough position right now if this economic downturn lasts for any long period of time. I mean, the whole world is, but when it comes to the Russian oil market, especially. Back over here, I just wanted to make that quick deviation.
Oil prices went down almost 15% in 2 days, which impacts working Americans much more than the stock market does. Interest rates hit their low for the year, so I'm expecting the mortgage applications to pick up.
Well, just to be very clear, though, I mean, during President Trump's first terms, the cost to Americans was nearly $80 billion in new taxes due to his tariffs. The prices did go up on everything from washing machines to tires.
Well, no, but let's go back. The aggregate number was 0.7, so we can discern the individual things. Also, households saw real net wages go up. So if wages go up faster than prices, which is not what happened over the past 4 years, that's why the bottom 50% got eviscerated.
Okay, let's move on to the last point. We're here with Scott Bessett again, and I thought this was interesting because you actually see a little clash of the right-wing minds here, as Larry Kudlow, who has been an economic mind on Fox News for as long as I've been alive and before when I was alive, talking to the Treasury Secretary about why, trade deficits exist and you're not just going to exterminate them all. It's impossible. Listen to this.
I just heard, I don't know if you heard Art Laffer in the prior interview, but Art doesn't believe that the trade deficit should be a metric. I don't really either. I mean, Mr. Secretary, if you get your tax cuts, and I guess you're well on the way, you get your deregulation, these are all huge pro-growth items. Okay. We will grow, the United States, will grow faster than Japan. We will grow faster than almost anybody. Therefore, almost by definition, by growing faster than the rest of the world, we're always going to have a trade deficit. So I don't know why you'd want to use the trade deficit in a calculation for a reciprocal charge. I understand your point about non-tariff barriers. I get that. That's why I would have chosen a handful of countries, I don't know, maybe 10 or a dozen countries, and really carefully pinpointed it. But to apply this to the whole world on the basis of trade deficits, is that really the best in your judgment? You've been around a long time. You've looked at these. You've done analysis. Is that really where we should be at?
Well, look, Larry, the trade deficit, as you and Art know, is a result of three things. It's a result of the terms of trade, it's a result of our budget deficit, and it's the result of the level of the dollar.
We're not going to get the dollar to a point where we're going to trade at a level where buying American goods is available for the mass majority of Vietnamese society. There's certain situations where you're just not going to be able to. And in order to do it, you would need to crash the American economy and whittle away American people's savings to drastically change the way that our economy functions from the ground up. And the American people did not ask for that. They asked for change. They didn't ask for that change to be, oh boy, the loss of 20 to 18 or 25% of the value of their savings, or the loss of how much of their stock value. That was not the change that they wanted, or the change that they asked for. Let's go on to what I thought was one of the funniest reactions the situation is not great. The American economy is going to go into some rough times likely. And so, we're kind of buckling down. We're hoping for the best. We're hoping for this pivot at the last second. But we got an offer of advice, something to soothe our souls and make us feel much better about the incoming economic issues. And that is Benny Johnson's answer on money. Losing money means nothing. Digital ones and zeros. In the end, you won't miss anything. You won't miss any of it. Losing your country costs you everything. You'll never get that back. Your kids will be slaves to foreign powers who hate us. Without America First policy, we become slaves. Fight. ... So dramatic. Losing money means nothing. Do you think that's how he reacted to every economic downturn during Biden's presidency? Oh, it means nothing. It's just money. Money means nothing. Lose every dime, lose your retirement, lose your ability to keep your kids housed, lose, pay raises that are tied to inflation, lose all these things. It doesn't matter. Just ones and zeros. There's never been a more disconnected message to your audience about how to react to an economic downturn. If it was all just ones and zeros, why did he need to take the tenant media money? If it means nothing, then don't take it. In fact, if it means nothing, then give it back. Also, I do want to just take this moment to remind everybody that Benny Johnson used to do fantastic work for BuzzFeed, making articles like 8 Sexiest Bachelors of Congress. DC, let these beefcakes warm you up. From Benny Johnson. Number 8, Lindsey Graham. This swanky senator has been serving South Carolina as a single man since 2003. He is great around the house. He knows how to handle a gun. He is on TV a lot. I don't know why that makes him. His hair looks like this sometimes. He has great friends. Number 7, Representative Eric Swalwell. My goodness, don't let anybody see that today, Benny. Don't let the people know that you think Eric Swalwell is hot and you think it's cool that he shakes hands with Obama. Oh my God, these are a lot of. You think he's a total stud, the Democratic congressman. My goodness, I had no idea. Aw, him with his kid. Representative Patrick Murphy. My God. Anyway, you can go read the rest of it if you want. You can learn all of the men he has crushes on. I don't know why he put that available online, but he did. I wanted now to check out a few compilations of conservative thought leaders, revolutionaries of the mind, you may call them, reacting to Trump's tariffs. As you can see, many of them scream and get squeamish and squirm over the position that Trump has put them in, as they either have to divert away attention, defend it, or basically throw in the white flag like this. Oh boy. Just check out this large swath of reactions from the bulwark, starting with Ben Shapiro to the Quartering to Fox and Friends and such.
Trump's reciprocal tariffs impose hundreds of billions of dollars in new taxes on Americans, be the largest tax increase since the Revenue Act of 1968. One of the biggest tax increases on American consumers in the history of America. And it's going to cost American consumers. It will cost American producers who use inputs from other countries. Trade wars are, in fact, not good and not easy to win, particularly if you don't actually have a plan. It is predicated on a bad...
It's so obvious that there's not a plan. There's so obvious that there's not a plan. You want to know how there's not a plan? Because when you talk about these terrible tariffs that all these countries have, and you need to get rid of these terrible, terrible tariffs, and so these countries come out and they say, okay, Vietnam said no more. No more tariff. We're done. No tariff. The 1% tariff that you said was 90 is gone. What does Peter Navarro and Trump's advisors say? No, it's not enough. We need to talk about the non-tariff cheating when we're placing our tariffs upon. The goalpost is moved. What's the end goal? Talk to different advisors, you get a different answer. Talk to Trump a different day of the week, you get a different answer. And it's not just when it comes to Vietnam, it's when it comes to the European Union as well, which has also offered a 0-for-0 free trade European policy, which also, by the way, is what Musk has asked for. What the European Union just offered Trump is what Musk said he wants the EU to offer. They offered it, and it's still not enough. Even Musk's biggest backers, even if he thinks that this map from Europe Universalis is an actual map from Europe in 1444, and is not a map from a video game, right? This man still has the economic sense to see it.
I'm hopeful, for example, with the tariffs, that at the end of the day, I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. That would be that's what I hope occurs.
Wrong game there, whatever. Some Hoi 4 equivalent, okay? Some map game. Something that we've all sank too many hours into.
Idea of how international trade works. A fundamental misunderstanding of trade deficits. Trade deficits they're an accounting procedure. Trade deficits have pretty much nothing to do with the health of an economy. I can name you a period in American history where there was a fairly large surplus in America's balance of trade. The entire Great Depression.
Dave, how much are you down right now and today? 7 million. I'm down $7 million in stocks and crypto. And it's tariff city. Trump has put his tariffs all over the place.
What people don't remember is that in 1930, we instituted like sweeping tariffs to try to do, well, exactly what we're talking about now, like we wanted to bring in revenue. People use different arguments for it, but you see a lot of the repetition of those arguments now. Many economists agree that ended up intensifying the Great Depression and making it worse as the world economy tried to recover. And that was that period where we instituted those tariffs during the period of the Great Depression. We did have not big trading deficits in the United States. We were net exporting. Congratulations, but we were still poor as shit. So, I mean, like, trade deficits aren't everything, okay? How much does Vietnam really need American Ford pickup trucks? Be cool if maybe some of the elite could buy those, but they're going to be able to get cheaper Chinese pickup trucks right from across the border in the north that'll cost them like $2,000, $2,500. How do we compete with that? In some instances, we're just going to have to accept that their market, just due to who the consumers are just not going to be able to pick up the amount of American goods, and those governments just don't have the budgets to subsidize the difference to get rid of our trade deficits with them. I mean, like, the most you could ever hope from Vietnam is, they go from 13.1 billion in trade to 15, 16. But I mean, we trade 113 billion with them. How are we going to get them to make up that difference? How much corn can they buy?
I've been trying to understand them. I don't.
By the way, $7 million down. Dave Portnoy, my God. How many pizza parlors could that have saved? How many pizza pies could that have bought?
Like, it's more a trade deficit tariff to me. Like, hey, we get this much.
See, listen to that. They don't even really know. They're in the same boat as me. I thought it was like we were trying to stop tariffs. Now I guess where it's about trade deficits now. I thought we were trying to do the reciprocal tariff, but we're just replacing the word tariff to mean trade deficit, I guess now.
Shit from you and you get this much from us. Let's even that up. Let's get some wacky formula and do tariffs. And everything's in the shitter because
wacky formula. There's just nothing. You can't throw that silly little equation on the TV and get people to say, "Nah, that makes sense." You can't. You've lost Barstool Sports.
Let's get some wacky formula and do tariffs. And everything's in the shitter because of it.
Look, I think it is a mistake to assume that we will have high tariffs in perpetuity. I don't think that would be good economic policy. I am not a fan of tariffs. If the result...
By the way, if you listen to different Trump advisors, they say different things on this. And China has responded with tariffs of their own. And Trump has said he'll respond with bigger tariffs on April 9th. So right now it's escalating. It's escalating. And there are people in Trump's inner circle that want them to be permanent. What happens if those people win the economic argument and the recession becomes almost guaranteed? If not, well, no, it would be basically guaranteed.
Is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere? I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers.
What President Trump is initiating here, this is a long-held belief that he believes that tariffs will correct those problems.
But what's also indisputable is the markets are down about 8% in just 2 days, and I'm getting all kinds of reaction from businesses, farmers in Wisconsin that are highly concerned about what's happening. So those are the facts. I don't
really farmers, but I was told that people don't look at the day-to-day movements of the stock market. But the other oh my, come on. Do they or do they not care?
No, all I can really do is kind of report the reality to the administration, let them know, how these these actions are impacting my constituents.
Moody's comes out and they said that an escalation of the trade war could wipe out 5.5 million jobs and lift unemployment to 7%, and GDP could drop 1.7%. That's if people don't come off it, and Moody's is not for it. This new round of tariffs, how long is it going to last? Are they going to last 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
Tariffs are a tax on people, too. You tax 20%, 10% on everything from China. That impacts anybody who buys that stuff.
Trust the plan. At least that's what I'm doing, because there's not really any other option.
Put all your faith in the basket, all your eggs into the basket. Please, please deliver. Please deliver, oh Lord. Oh, great apprentice.
Other than freaking out on Twitter, but sure, the stock market, maybe don't look at it this week. Maybe don't.
By the way, if you really thought there was anything deeper to like a trust in Trump economically outside of he's a businessman, there really wasn't anything else. People remembered him from The Apprentice. People remembered that he talked big money. People remember that he's a businessman, thought he was the money man. And so they thought that he had the smart economic sense. Okay, now let's throw out there that his record in the field of business was not always stellar. 6 bankruptcies, failed with many casinos, which are kind of set up to steal your money, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily look at that record as something that would say that he would perform well in office necessarily either. But let's just say that is one. He was a real estate guy. Real estate and running a country are two very different things. And you can see those differences clash when he starts talking about Gaza like it's a piece of prime real estate, and it's not people's home with cultures and geopolitical tensions that lead to dead bodies.
Immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
And so if you really thought it was like, well, people remember Trump's economic philosophy and XYZ, a lot of it really was. And the vast majority of people I talked to that voted for him on the economy, and not out of some longer held strength in him, like I believe in Trump, et cetera, it was under this idea that he's a businessman. I don't like how it's going. We need a change. He's a businessman. We need the economy to work. I don't know. It seems like a puzzle and a puzzle piece, right? That's how deep it went. That's really how deep it went for a lot of people. At least for the people who made the difference.
Don't look at it today.
By the way, that's not just I'm not even saying that's a failure upon those people. I mean, obviously, many of those people have regrets now, but it's also a failure of opposition messaging on Trump's economic agenda and on their counter agenda.
Everyone out there who are living off their 401ks and in retirement, I understand this kind of thing is hard to just kind of chill and wait.
BMW is going to rethink South Carolina because it's not going to import tariffed parts, engines from Germany.
See, this is the problem. When we talk about manufacturing in the United States, there's this belief, it seems to be, that we're going to make literally fucking everything here. But if you don't compromise with companies and say, look, you can bring in 10 to 20% of the things in order to avoid it. You got to find some way to compromise with them, because there are certain factories that are built to make it already at a low cost, ready to go right now in countries right across the border that could be well integrated in Canada, in Mexico, that have been well integrated, that blocking them off is going to make us lose jobs. We've already lost jobs, and future factories are being thrown into disarray. So we're talking about undercutting the people who are working now, undercutting future industrial projects that were planned, for the hope that this incentive will overwhelm all of the negative effects we're seeing right now, and that Trump will be able to keep a cohesive enough and a cogent enough economic line and policy on this that it can be stable enough for people to lose investor worry, gain investor confidence, and put money down in American manufacturing. Good luck.
Then to send those vehicles to export them. So again, it will mean if that plant stays open, it will mean fewer jobs potentially because they sell them they export them to China.
No, but I'm saying you can't make
they import the parts, which will be tariffed, and then they will export them from the United States where they're manufactured back to Europe, where they will be tariffed again, and then to China and nations around the globe, right? So these are the problems that a U.S. manufacturer faces because the parts are coming from somewhere else.
They can also just make the parts here. They can make the car.
No, they can't. Absolutely not. That's a fallacy.
It's impossible.
Some of our closest.
No, they can't. No, they can't. Just right from the fox's mouth. My God. No, they can't. Ugh, it must be a little painful. Thank you, Advocatus Diablo, for the tier 3 sub. I appreciate that. Trust the plan. The plan, crush the economy to own the libs. I will say I do feel particularly owned. I feel very owned. Owned and operated.
Allies, not just Canada and Mexico, but looking to the Asian, allies, putting tariffs on South Korea, on China, on Japan. Now we're seeing countries like Japan and South Korea move closer to China. So if we're going to see our allies move closer to what this administration calls our peer adversary, China, that should be concerning. And that's what we also need to look at what these costs of tariffs are going to do.
In the long run, we're all dead. Short run matters too. Nobody knows what the impact of these tariffs is going to be on the economy. Anyone who said
when people keep saying what the effects, we know what the effects are going to be. We see the effects right now. A bear market in a bear market, almost certainly. A recession avoiding would be nice, but that depends upon us pulling back from these tariffs. If we keep on these tariffs, then we're walking the same path. We can see the bet reads before us from the path of those who have tried this before.
As there may be a little bit of pain before we get things right. Need to talk about farmers who are one crop away from bankruptcy.
They get a lot of their beef from Canada and Mexico. If you get a 25% tariff on that, what's that do?
Well, it's going to increase the price. It's going to, the consumer's going to pay for it. My philosophy is to sell it as low as you can to show a savings, a value to the customer, and hopefully you have more customers.
And let me just throw this at you because I see somebody in chat right now. And I want to throw this. I want to engage with this a little honestly, right? It would be nice for all of these nations to engage in, free trade. So for the past 3 generations, we've advocated for free trade. But as soon as the U.S. attempts to engage in actual fair trade, let's be clear. If what you're advocating is that 0 for 0, trade for trade, absolute free trade, we have no tariffs, you have no tariffs, that has been offered. That has been offered. Has been offered by the European Union. That was just offered by van der Leyen to the media in public. As far as we know, that has not been accepted. And it has been offered by the Vietnamese. That has also been rejected by Peter Navarro and others in Trump's inner circle. And we have yet to hear of any acceptance from the Trump team. In fact, now we're hearing about, well, no, it's not that we care about the actual physical tariffs that were placed upon it. It's about the non-tariff tariff issues that are between our between our countries, and and it seems to be mostly just about the trade deficit, as we can all see now. But again, you're not going to get Vietnam to buy American manufactured goods that are going to make up that difference. And if what your issue is free and fair trade, then this has nothing to do with that in the first place. Free and fair trade doesn't mean, hey, we all have 100% equal, there's no deficits. Free and fair trade doesn't mean we trade you 100 billion, you trade us 100 billion. Free trade means your people can go up to our market and buy whatever we want, we ship it there, and that your people can, vice versa. It's the same thing. That's what free and fair trade means. So if there are government barriers stopping that, but that's not what is being attacked right now by the Trump administration in their math equation they've introduced. Their math equation's primary factor in determining these high tariffs is trade deficits. That's why Vietnam, even though they've been a very beneficial and friendly U.S. trading partner in Asia, has been hit with some of the hardest trading tariffs, despite the fact that they've offered to get rid of all tariffs entirely, which was at a shocking 1.1%. Here is a reporter asking Donald Trump about agreeing to drop their tariffs to 0 and if that would be enough to get a deal with the European Union, and him just flat out saying no. Because I see something like, we just heard this EU offer. Like, okay, we just heard it. Here's Trump responding to it.
Mr. President, you said it may
The EU has said that they have offered 0 for 0 tariffs on cars and industrial goods. Is that not enough?
Well, the EU, no, it's not. The EU has been very tough over the years. I always say it was formed to really do damage to the United States in trade. That's the reason it was formed. It was formed with all of the countries.
It wasn't. I mean, I'm sorry, but, you know, I've had to work in Europe for 3 years now, going on 4. I had to learn about EU history. It wasn't. It started as a mechanism to integrate Western European economies with each other. It was a free trade grouping for Europe. And I mean, like, in the devastation after World War II, all of those countries were buying so many American goods. That period where the EU was being formed to integrate European trade was one of the most prosperous periods for American manufacturing, because we were providing what they were consuming, because all their manufacturing had been blown up. It was not formed for the purpose of that. It was why? It was a trade union.
Countries from
that expanded to a political union.
Europe, I guess most of them, not all of them, but most of them, and they formed together.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to say this. America supported its creation. Somebody just threw that out in chat, and I know it. I know this. I just didn't think it was important to mention. Just such a silly thing, but yeah, it's also true. We supported its creation. Why would we support the creation of an organization founded to destroy America? Why?
Most of them, not all of them, but most of them, and they formed together to create a little bit of a monopoly situation, to create a unified force against the United States for trade. So they have NATO, which is largely the same countries, and they took advantage of us dollar-wise and militarily until I got there. You know, I was able to get $600 billion from NATO.
And I think Putin did most of that. I do want to throw out there that now, if you think that this trade deficit turning into tariff, like now it's all about trade deficits, and now countries, you can't have trade deficit with America, that's bad. Even though if we're a stronger economy, that's going to naturally come with being a strong economy. A lot of this, and this is a problem with Trump's policies on the economy, a lot of them are contradictory. We need to strengthen the dollar because we want to keep it as a global reserve. We need to protect its global reserve status, but also we need to break it down so our manufacturing is working better. And these are two contradictory issues that are pressing against each other. That best case scenario, because of their pressing both in the same direction, we don't move at all. Best case scenario. But if you think that, you know, this is what Trump's saying, the words of the leader of your movement, you know, it goes down the organization. It goes down the spine. It goes down the lungs and the bloodstream of the Republican Party and into much of its leadership. And so now you have what was a free trade party having Republicans get up there and say that there should be no trade deficits. 0. That there's no economic sense to this policy. But because Trump has, through fumbling and stumbling about, and through the way that these tariffs have worked, basically just punished the existence of trade deficits, which are going to exist, especially if you have a strong economy in comparison to a much weaker economy. Like, for example, I'm not trying to say Vietnam's a weak economy, but they don't have as much girth as the United States. You're going to have those. Those things are going to exist. But the political logic, political obedience, the keeping to the party line, or at least Trump's line, which has become the party line, is now more important. So now you have Representative Roger Williams, Republican, on Fox News basically condemning the existence of all trade deficits and saying we shouldn't have any, period.
Senators urging Americans to stick with him as this tariffs strategy plays out. He said this on Truth Social this morning. The United States has a chance to do something that should have been done decades ago. Don't be weak. Don't be stupid. Don't be a panican, a new party based on weak and stupid people. Be strong, courageous, and patient, and greatness will be the result. What's your take on this?
Well, our take is that I think he's right. We shouldn't have trade differences with anybody. We're the biggest economy in the world, so we got to fix the trade differences. But I think people are with him. 75 million people. This is one of the things he talked about doing.
Could you imagine that we're one country of 330 million people. There must be a industry somewhere in some country where they do it better than us. Okay? We're America. We like to think we're number one and whatever, but that must exist. Imagine putting yourself in a situation where you won't take the things that will benefit your economy, that your consumers want, that you're going to put undue costs and taxes on American consumers to bring in those goods that could benefit the United States as a whole, because you just don't want the trade deficit to exist. This is a non-functioning policy. We're not going to be able to make up the difference in manufacturing of any number of goods domestically, even if we attempted to with full force and with gigantic government subsidy fast enough to make up for the economic dip in the bear market that could easily slide into a recession. But don't worry, there's a silver lining. Used cars are going to be worth more because no one's going to want to buy new cars.
And people with used cars are going to be worth a little bit more. And when it's worth more, they have more down payment, they have more equity, and they can make their payment less than it was.
Yeah. You know,
You hear that, guys? Used car salesmen congratulations, guys. O'Reilly's Auto Parts stock has gone up because people are going to repair their cars because they're not going to have enough money to buy a new one. There's the economic benefit we have gotten. Praise be. And when this is all over, don't let anybody forget whose plan and policy this was. By the way, do you guys notice that there are people in the Trump team who seem to be trying to keep themselves, I'm not going to say that they're completely like going silent on it, but they seem to be, you know, they're letting Trump take lead on crusading when it comes to tariffs. And I think it's because they don't really desire being the face of tariffs. There are a few of them I think maybe do, but most of them don't. And so I think when this is thrown out there for people like John Kennedy, you know, Republican senators like him who have been around the block a lot longer and have held more to the more traditional free trade Republican logic, they seem to be standing at a longer distance away from this. They're not coming out and publicly undermining it, but they're certainly not championing it around like a hero. Listen to this.
It's been painful, but it may turn out well. It may not. If it doesn't turn out well, I think the president will recalibrate.
To that point, do you think it's Donald Trump's economy now?
Oh, I think it is. There's no question. I think once he decided to add the tariffs, clearly, I mean, he will be held responsible, as he should, whether it turns out good or it turns out badly.
Is there a point at which you would consider supporting taking tariff authority back into congressional hands? There have been some efforts in the Senate to do that.
Well,
I think there's a strong case for it. Look, if tariffs can have this much of a drastic effect on the economy so quickly and can be applied so unilaterally by the executive branch, even when they weren't elected on a platform, I mean, they were elected on a platform to make trade, you know, to fight back against unfair trade practices. Not, we're going to stop all trade deficits, period. That wasn't the platform that even Trump ran on, and his tariff platform on the election, like on the campaign trail, wasn't even that cohesive or coherent. But he certainly didn't run on this.
If I finally concluded that what the president is proposing is not going to work, or if the treatment is worse than the disease, sure. And I'm going to look at Senator Grassley's bill very closely. But I'm not there yet.